Hello and welcome to a lesson on local storage. So today we're going to learn on how to really manage our local server hard drive, how to create volumes, shrink volumes, expand volumes, and so on. So let's just get to it and let's go to our server and let's log in, see what we have to do. Okay, I'll log in into the server and when you get there, we want to go to computer management. So, and from computer management, you'll get to disk management. So click on the start menu when let it boot up, still booting up. And in here, in any place, just write computer. You'll see computer management. Click on it. Okay, so here we go. And right down here, you'll see disk management. So click on that. And you'll see this is your hard drive. So this is your physical drive. As you can see, this is the hard drive. There's two disks, the hard drive and the CD-ROM. We're not going to really do anything with the CD-ROM. We'll just work with the hard drive itself. If you remember on the first lesson when we actually installed the server, we took a we created a hard drive of about 32 gigs. Some of you may have more, but that's what I did. It's about 30.7. It saved about 300 megabytes for recovery and the EFI system, which is really some basic information that is placed on the hard drive for the operating system itself to make sure that for the operating system itself, the boot sector, the MDR, and all that wonderful stuff. So you don't play any around with this information right here. This is your hard drive where your operating system, and it says healthy, and it has everything that's in there. These are called the volumes. We don't, even though it's really in the old days, we used to call them partitions. A volume is a logical representation on the physical drive. So what I want to do is let's right click on the C drive and you can actually shrink this volume on the fly. In the old days, you can do that. If you wanted to repartition the hard drive, you have to clean everything and from scratch start all over. But now we can actually repartition, create another volume, in other words, without having to just get rid of everything. So right click, click on shrink volume. So it's calculating to see how much space you can really shrink your drive without corrupting everything else. So it's saying to you that you have 32 gigs approximately. Available space is about 22 gigs. So it's asking us how much space do you want to shrink? You know what? I want to go very, very small because I don't want anything to be to really corrupt anything because this is our domain controller. I don't want to play. Let's just do a thousand meg, right? So after we shrink, we're going to have about 32 gigs left because there's only using 22 gig out of the 32. All right, so let's just call shrink. And there you go. I have 1,000 megabyte unallocated disk space. It's not formatted or anything like that. So what you want to do is right click on it and you can create a simple volume. You can create a spanned volume, striped volume, mirrored volume, or RAID volume. All of these are spanned out except the new volume because you need to have a separate physical drive to be able to do a span volume, striped, mirrored, and RAID. Or, let's just do a simple new volume. Click on that. We'll talk about the others later on. Click on next. Okay, so how much space volume do you want to do? Um, It says maximum space size is a gigabyte. We are going to maximum disk space is 8 megs to set the volume. So just click on next. We want to format the whole thing. Now it's going to ask you, you know what, let's just go back. Instead of I don't want to use the whole allocated. Let's just do 500 megs. Okay. Don't do that. Let's not format. I want to show you that you can take this allocated and break it up again. And so just create 500 megs. Okay, now you want to assign a letter to this 500 meg that you are creating. And there's a whole bunch of letter drives that you can do. It's defaulted to letter E. You can choose A and B, but preferably I want you not to really use it because A and B in the old days were used for floppy drives. Although you can if you want to, but I don't really recommend it just in case you ever need to move your drive to an older machine. Um, so we'll just leave it at the default letter E. You can mount the following space to a folder if you wanted to, if you click right here. And, I'm not sure why would you want to do that. So what this really does is it takes a folder on your server and it will just add 500 megs to it. Um, so if you needed more space, but I'm not you rarely ever do that. In Unix machines, everything mounted gets a letter. That's probably not where this came from, but I don't know anyone that really does this, to be honest with you. All right, so just give it a letter E, click on next. All right, now we're going to get to format it. Now there is a format system. There's a new format system, by the way. It's called, the one I want you to see is the RE, the Resilient File System. We're not going to choose that, but this is something new. From the name itself, it's called Resilient. It allows you to, and it's really an enhanced NTFS system. It has better data protections, scalabilities, and things like that. Um, so data does, if it got corrupted, it's recoverable much quicker. Better data space, more efficient use of the hard drive. We'll leave it at NTFS, and we're going to do a quick format. All right, and finish. And bingo, done very quickly. And there is my new hard drive, and it has a letter E, right? And we still have a 501 allocated space. And okay, so that's how you shrink a hard drive. So take a screenshot of this so I can see that you created the new hard drive, the letter E, with 500 meg in it. All right. So what we could do is we can actually, if you right click on that drive, well, no, you can now extend it if you wanted to. But before we do that, I want you to right click on the other 500 unallocated drive. Let's talk about these other volume types. Even though we don't have a physical, you need a physical drive, an additional physical drive or drives to really do a spanned or striped or mirrored or RAID 5 volumes. Okay, let's talk about that. If you wanted to do a spanned volume, a spanned volume is when you take an area of one space of one more than one physical space, one space of one drive, and take another space of another physical drive and combine them together as one volume. So when you span the volume is one volume. You see it, let's say F drive. F drive is really a space from one hard drive and another hard drive, and it becomes bigger. This is in the old days when you had, let's say, you see that your um, the server hard drive volume is getting used up very, very quickly, and you just wanted to add space without having to move everything. You just take another disk, pop it in, a hot swappable disk. You add another physical disk, you go in here, and you just expand it. And you just expand it. So let's say you had a 10 gig hard drive, you put another 10 gig. Now the volume goes from 10 gigs to 20 gigs. You just made a bigger hard drive, bigger space. That's what spanned volume does. It just gives you more space, but it's over two physical drives. Striped volume, what it does is also called RAID 0. It's two or more physical disks, and what you're doing is you're striping the data across the disks. So in other words, you put the data on one, put some of the data on disk one, some of the data on disk two, some of the data on disk three, and so on, depending on how many disks you have. Because most operating systems and computers have what's called bus mastering, which means they can go in, read from multiple disks at the same time, read and write at the same time. So you get a lot of the read, especially the read performance is enhanced. So for quickness, RAID 0. So that's why you would use striped volume is for performance purposes. You'll get much better read performance because you are placing the data or reading the data at a multiple drives. And again, that's RAID 0. Mirrored drive is when you have two drives, physically only two drives, not multiple, and you make it mirror. That means whatever you have on one drive is exactly mirrored on the other. And that's for redundancy. That's where the name, by the way, RAID comes in. Redundancy array of independent drives. That's what it stands for. So the mirrored drive is your RAID 1. So when you have two mirrored drives, the content that is placed on one disk is placed on the other. You also, by the way, because of must master, you'll be able to read and write at the same time. But the idea of mirrored drive is that if one drive fails, the other one picks up immediately. Um, Almost every server that I've done have a mirrored drive. This is for backup just in case something goes wrong. And since hard drives are electromechanical devices, they will fail. So you definitely want to purchase another hardware drive. Don't do this. You could actually do software RAID, but that's really not recommended. What I really like you to do, if you ever need to do this, is to purchase another hard drive with its own controller and then do mirror drive. So in case one drive physically fails, the other one picks up immediately. Almost everybody does that with their servers. And the other type of RAID is RAID 5. RAID 5 is when you have three minimum physical drives, you combine them as like, by the way, RAID 1, the mirror drive, when you combine the two drives, you see them as one drive, but the data is placed on two different places. With RAID 5, you take a minimum of three physical disks, and again, you spread the data out, but you take one disk that is used for redundancy. Not redundancy, for parity check. So before you place the data on the disk, you look at the ones and the zeros on the data that you are going to place on the disk, and you come up with a number, a parity number, and you place it on one of those disks. This is so when you come back to read, you want to double check and make sure the data is not corrupted. You look at the ones and zeros from the read data, and then you recalculate the number and look at the parity number and make sure that the data was not corrupted when it was placed on the disk. Not used as much. I'm telling you, mirror drive is the most widely used out of these different types of RAIDs. Okay, so here's a question that I want you to write. I want you, even if you have to rewind, I want you to explain to me what is a spanned volume, striped volume, a mirrored volume, and a RAID volume, right? So write those four things down underneath the first print screen that you did. Okay? So going back, so you know what? Let's take and expand the drive. Let's extend it. So let's right click on the E drive that we did. We want to extend it, make it a little bit bigger. So and go to extend volume and want to make it a little bit more than here. So we want to extend it into, let's see, disk 0, which has 500 megs. That's this guy right here. So let's take, instead of 500, let's make it just 25, 250, right? We want to extend it. Click on next. Although you can choose anything you want, you can remove this. And so we'll be left with, it'll become 750 after we extend it. And click on finished. Bingo. This We used up a little bit more than the allocated, and now we have 750 meg. Okay, take another snapshot of this. Now, so I can see that you know how to extend your volume, not only shrinking it. The last thing that I really want you to know when it comes to disk management is you take a look at here, it's called disk zero. This is really a basic disk. A basic disk is really like a physical drive, all the information about the disk partitions, what's if you used any of the RAID drive is really assigned with the operating system. If you right click on this, there's something called dynamic disk that you can convert this to. A dynamic drive is is may not be compatible with other OS systems. This is done is if you want dynamic means that you can actually take this drive, take it and put it in a different computer, move it from one computer to another. So let's say the computer that where this operating system is, something went wrong with it, and but you need the hard drive. So you take this hard drive and put it on another computer. The the only difference is between the basic disk, what this is, and the dynamic disk is on the basic disk. When you create all these partitions and everything that you did, all that information is placed with the operating system. And if with a dynamic disk, the data is placed, that data is left on the drive itself. So when you take it and move it to another, the operating system, the new operating system will come in and say, okay, how is this drive partitions? Give me information about how everything has been. What are the volumes? Have you been participating with a striped other drives or things like that? Are you doing RAID 0 or RAID 1 or whatever? So the information is taken from here and given to the other operating system and everything will be okay. Okay, the only problem with that is if that operating system is old and does not know how to deal with the information that is given, it could be an issue. So make sure when you want to go to dynamic, that you really don't want to go back to disk, although you can basic disk, although you can do it, but if you do it, you have to erase everything. So you'll lose all your information if you ever need to go back to basic disk. So if you had any information on your drive, you would lose it. All right. So the last thing that I want you to write down is what's the difference between a basic disk and a dynamic disk, and what is the advantage of using a dynamic disks? Okay, and disadvantages, of course. All right. There's another thing that we did not really talk about, and then that is virtual drives, virtual storage, but we'll leave that for another lesson when we talk about Hyper-V. All right, that's it. So until the next lesson, keep up the good work.